What's leadership? Who is a leader? What does it take to find success as a leader? These questions and more are explored throughout the episodes on supporting leaders. Listeners get to hear from a diverse group of experts within a wide range of industry. Come along with us on the road to growth and learning. I'm your host, Dr. Lisa Hartman. Today's podcast episode is with Jamy Bechler. And Jamy is one of those guests where I'm like, is this person really coming on this podcast? I was super excited to have Jamy. I tracked him down on LinkedIn. He's a consultant for professional and college teams. He's an author, a speaker, a podcast host. And I was really curious to get his insights into leadership since he works with such a wide range of people. And I really wanted to tap into that athletic mindset too, just to see, what's the same and what's different. And he shares so much about leadership. We talk about at the end, we get into what the pandemic has revealed about leadership. We talk about how to build successful teams. We talk about the importance of trust and relationships. Jamy has some fantastic stories that he shares in this episode. So this is a must listen. Put this up next on your podcast listening. But here's a little bit more about Jamy. He's a professional speaker, team consultant for teams ranging from the NBA to the Big Ten. He's an independent John Maxwell certified motivational speaker, leadership trainer, and executive coach. He works with teams and businesses across the country, helping them maximize their potential for success. He's written 6 eBooks and 3 published books, including the Leadership Playbook, Become Your Team's Most Valuable Leader. He's also the host of the Success is a Choice podcast, interviewing thought leaders from various industries. Prior to going into full-time leadership training, he was the athletic director at Marion High School, where he won the 8th state basketball championship and was host to the 5th largest high school arena in the nation with a capacity of 7,500 people. Before Marion, he spent more than 20 years at the collegiate level as a student athlete, basketball coach, professor, and athletic administrator. In 2014, his basketball team earned the National Champions of Character Award. He was the head basketball coach at 4 different colleges. When he left Martin Methodist Colleges, he was the program's all-time winningest coach. He's passionate about leadership and helping people develop, grow, and maximize potential for significant growth in their life. You can read more about these things at www.jamybechler.com. Enjoy the episode. Okay, well, today on the Supporting Leaders podcast, we have Jamy Bechler. And Jamy, you yourself have this phenomenal podcast. I listened to an episode where there was a gal who was a catcher, and there was so much that she was talking about that I'm like, oh, this is so applicable to leadership. And, looking at your bio, and you've worked with a lot of professional and college teams, and you have that athletic mindset, obviously. I just thought that this would be such a great interview to have you on. So tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to be in the position that you're currently in.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me, Lisa. And I was a college coach for about 20 years, college basketball coach at all different levels. I coached both men and women. And then I went in, I was an athletic director at a high school with a large athletic program in Indiana. They had the 5th largest gymnasium in the world. It seated over 7,000 people.
Wow.
Nobody has won more boys basketball titles than they have at that school. So when you think Indiana basketball, I mean, they're pretty much the top when it comes to Indiana basketball. And so when I went there, was an AD there for a couple of years. And then we moved out of there and went into full-time business myself, entrepreneur. I went into leadership consulting. I speak, write books, do a podcast, as you said, the Success is a Choice podcast. So we've been doing that for about 4 years. So depending on the day, I'm either self-employed or unemployed.
Yeah.
So I guess that's what being in business is like.
Yes. Well, it's a really unique and fascinating story that you have. And I would recommend people to go and listen to that podcast because it was very well done. And the one I listened to anyway, she was very interesting guest that you had on. And so one of the things that you have going for you is you are a John Maxwell certified speaker. So what does that mean to be a John Maxwell certified? I would think most people know John Maxwell, but what does that mean to be a certified speaker?
It means that you paid a lot of money and you were trained by he and his teaching staff. But it was something that I believe 2011, they decided to start certifying and training some coaches. And at that time I was approached by one of their people in their organization. And at the time I was like, yeah, I don't really have the extra money kicking around. I don't really have the time. And he's like, well, you're never going to have the time and you're never going to have enough money. And I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. I'm like, but right now it's not for me. And then 4 years later, I'm an athletic director, and I'm like, you know what? Leadership's always been a passion of mine. I've always loved John Maxwell stuff. Maybe I could go do this. I have more money. I never have time. You never have enough time, but I have money. I can, I have enough money. We can do this. Let's do this. And it might help me be a better leader to our student athletes.
Yeah.
And I got into it, and I'm going through the classes, the online work, on the live calls, and I'm realizing that, yeah, this is going to help me as a leader, but I could make a business out of this. Like, I'd never really thought of, all right, you can do this full time. You can do this at other high schools. You can do this at other colleges. So you're not just influencing your 15 basketball players, and you're not just influencing, though it's important, but you're not just influencing your 400 student athletes at your school, but you could influence thousands and thousands out there. And so I started thinking about this full time, and we, at the end of that school year, we just jumped into the deep end, both feet, and went on our merry way. We left organized athletics, and we moved into the leadership consulting and speaking, and just helping people be better leaders and better teammates, and creating better cultures, whether it's a business or a school or a sports team. And so it's been fun for the last 4 years.
Wow. Well, I really want to pick your brain about some of what you just talked about, because I think it's fascinating to think about how you work with athletes, and then also how you work with business leaders. And so, what are some of the differences and what are some of the similarities? So again, to reference back to that episode I listened to, this catcher was talking about like how she helps athletes kind of work through some of their failures, and she talked about, you got to accept it. You've got to talk about what went well, what didn't go well. And I'm just thinking there's so much here that's applicable to everyday leadership. So what are some of the things that you've noticed that's the same and what's different?
Well, there's certainly there's some differences. There's always going to be some nuances no matter who you're working with. But at the end of the day, a lot of leadership is the same, no matter if you're working with a sports team at the professional level, the high school level, the college level, or you're working with a bunch of bankers, you're working a bunch of IT professionals, it doesn't matter. I think leadership, sometimes we think of it wrong. I think a lot of us think of leadership in the wrong way. We think of it as a title or a position or some kind of a status. You are a manager, so you are a leader. Lisa, you're in educational administration. So you're a leader. You're a principal. You're a superintendent. So you're a leader. No, your janitor can be a leader too. Your secretary, who takes your calls and meets with everybody before they come into your office, is a leader, because they can influence people.
Yes.
They can have an influence, an impact on people, and they can help move your organization forward. And in some ways, like when I was an athletic director, in some ways, those nice emails I might send out, or the pretty posters I might put up on our wall, or, the memos I would send out, those might be great in a way, but how I treated my secretary went farther for creating a culture than any email or poster I would put up. Because if I was short with her, or if I didn't greet her nicely or kindly, in the morning, she's now going to talk to and communicate with hundreds of people that day. And if she has a bad attitude because of one word I said or one word I didn't say, all of a sudden, it doesn't matter what kind of pretty posters I have up on the wall in our break room, in our locker room, in our boardroom, in our office. It doesn't matter. So leadership is really about influence, and it's really about people. It's how are you treating people to get people, all of us, inspired to move in one direction to get to where we want to go. And so that's a long way of saying, I think we look at leadership wrong. Either we say, well, I'm nobody, I'm not a leader, I can't do anything. No, you can. I deal with sports teams all the time. 2 freshmen at the end of the bench can lead each other. They can lead each other to do what's right. All right. We can influence each other to do the things right. And then, you know what? That's probably not my own, if Lisa and I, if you and I are at the end of the bench, we might not be the only friends that we have.
Yeah.
Okay. I influence you, but maybe you have a roommate, or maybe you have another friend, or maybe you have a cousin that's on the team. Well, now if I'm influencing you, right, now you could influence that person to do what's right. And still we have we have no status. We have no authority. We have no position, but we can influence each other to do what's right. And eventually you get all these people going in the right direction. And I think of it and I'll end this kind of this segment or this talk about, we've all been to big sporting events with the wave. They do the wave. Never at one of these sporting events do they come over the loudspeaker or put on the Jumbotron. All right, section 23, you're going to start the wave, and then it's going to go to section 24. It's never like that. It's one yahoo getting another drunk yahoo next to him who gets another drunk yahoo to do the wave. And before you know it, you got 80,000 fans doing the wave, and nobody knows if it was the ugliest, the prettiest, the richest, the poorest, the oldest, the youngest, the shortest, tallest person in the stadium. No one knows who started the wave, but one person got another person who got another person who got another person to do something. And eventually it's a movement. Eventually you've impacted, and no status was required. That's how I look at any organization, any school, any sports team. We all can do what's right. And then we can all inspire the people closest to us to do what's right. And eventually everyone could be doing what's right.
I love that. I mean, like, part of me doing this podcast, it's all about supporting leaders. And I think sometimes it gets so complex. And, part of me wanting to have these conversations with people is to sort it out and, like, what can people do? And to me, what you just said makes it almost seem so simple sometimes. Like, it just comes down to influence. Like, just have a positive influence on the people around you, and anybody can do it. So I love that you talked about that. So let me ask you this though. So somebody who's a college coach or a professional coach, I'd imagine it's a little bit of a different kind of leadership, because you are potentially dealing with people who are the best of the best. You were the best player on your high school team, and now you're playing for the college, at the college level. Like, what does the leadership take in that regard to navigate? I would imagine there's probably some ego that comes with that, but navigate pulling them all together to form this new team.
It's a great question. I will give you a bad answer to a great question. It really doesn't matter what level you're at. Almost all of the issues, almost all of your leadership skills, the way you're going to lead people is going to be the same. There's going to be different dynamics, certainly. You working with a seventh grader obviously is different than working with a professional basketball player who has millions of dollars. Obviously, there's some differences there. But that seventh grader still wants attention. They still want affection. They still want to be recognized. They still have ego. They want to be accepted. That pro, just because their bank account's bigger, just because they can jump higher or run faster, they still have ego. They still have feelings. They still have emotion. And so it doesn't matter if you're teaching seventh graders, if you're teaching pros, if you're working in a bank or you're working in a sports team, you have to understand where people are coming from, know what makes them tick, see their perspective, understand that they're people, and find ways to get the best out of them. How can I inspire them? And it's not about me telling Lisa, all right, Lisa, you got to do this, this, and this. Well, finding out what Lisa wants, finding out what Lisa needs, finding out what her hopes and fears are, finding out what makes her tick. And I know that's kind of a bad answer, because it's not a set. Okay, well, when you work with the pros, you do this. When you work with college, you do this. When you work with high school, you do this. Yeah, there are some nuances. In high school, unless you're working at a private school, you're not going to have to deal with roommates. Their roommate is going to be their family. Mm-hmm. College, you're going to have to deal with roommates. College, you're going to have to deal with, maybe there's no curfew. There's nuances. There's structural things. But at the end of the day, that 16-year-old that has to go home to mom and dad still doesn't like mom and dad telling them what to do. And that 22-year-old in a dorm still doesn't like the resident hall director telling them what to do. They still don't like the teacher saying, well, didn't you look at the syllabus? You should have known that this was due.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, people still are people, and they're human beings. And so as leaders at any level, a positional leader, somebody that maybe has authority, maybe has status, you still got to find out what makes your people tick. What do they really want? What will inspire them? And that's what you've got to give and engage with them, ask them the right questions, or ask them questions, period.
Yes.
Don't
Yes.
just assume. And I want to go back to something you said a few minutes ago. You said that, what you said, Jamy, sounds so simple. It is kind of simple, but it's not easy.
Yeah.
It is simple to understand that, what, if I'm at a school, I need to treat the janitors really well because they don't get paid much. They have a job that maybe they don't like. Nobody, not respects them, but they're not put up on a pedestal. They're not front page news for, hey, you clean this building really well. They're underappreciated, underpaid. And it's simple for us to understand, hey, we need to treat them well. It's harder for us to actually do that sometimes. It's harder for us to intentionally say, I'm going to do all that I can to make sure our custodians feel like they're a part of when our school wins an award for academics, they were a part of that. When our teams win, they were a part of that. They are a part. We are all a part of this. When something happens, the secretaries are a part of that. Substitute teachers are a part of that. So it's simple to understand. It's harder for us to do.
Yes.
Because we're all covering our own butts. We're all worrying about our own tree and not the whole forest. It's simple to say, it's simple to understand. It's harder to do, but we have to be intentional, and good leaders are intentional about making it about the people.
Yeah. Well, the whole time you're talking, I think I heard it 5 times. Intentional. Influence might be, it might be an easy concept to think about influence, but that intentionality, that takes a ton of effort. So to go back to when you were talking about to lead and work with people, you're, uncovering their needs, who they are, their human beings, their feelings. So you've got all these people on your team, whether you're a business or if you're in athletics. How do you get them with all those unique different personalities, wants, needs, desires? How do you get them to come together and function as a team?
Well, first of all, you're not going to be able to get them to come together as a team if they don't know, like, and trust you. Because as a team, let's take sports.
Mm-hmm.
As a coach, I am in the sales business. I'm not selling a used car. I'm not selling a microwave or a toaster oven. I'm selling that they have to sacrifice for the team. I'm selling that they have to touch the line in sprints. I'm selling them that if they don't play as much and somebody else plays, it'll help the team. I'm selling them on all kinds of things.
Yeah.
They're not buying what I'm selling unless they know, like, and trust me. And they're not going to know, like, and trust me unless I've connected with them on some level. It can't be, hey, I'm going to listen to Coach Bechler because he's smarter than me. So what? Or Coach Bechler has won these championships. So what? That was a different team. That was in the past. They're not going to listen to me because I have a business card or a name plaque, or I have so many Twitter followers or Instagram followers, or I've done this or this or this in the past. They're going to listen to me because they know, like, and trust me. I have to connect with them. And that is hard for us because if I'm a coach, I've got to put in a zone offense or a man-to-man offense, or we've got to get these drills done.
Yep.
If I'm a principal, I've got to do this paperwork. We've got to fulfill this thing. I've got to do this, this, and this. And we get bogged down in the minutia of being a manager and stop being a leader.
Yeah.
We don't think of, we manage, we do all these X's and O's or all these details. And then before we know it, the team didn't come together because not everybody on the team bought into me. They didn't buy into me. They might know I'm an expert, but they didn't buy into me. Oh, Jamy, or, oh, Coach Bechler, he's just doing this because that's what coaches do. Or, he's only talking to me or saying this to me because he wants me to make baskets or whatever it is. You have to prove to them that you actually care about them. And that's hard to do. As a husband, so much easier for me to bring home flowers, chocolates, or a card than it is to actually talk to my wife, to actually listen to my wife, to actually pick up my socks all the time for the millionth time when she asked me to do that. But to do all these things that demonstrate my love, like real love, not just, oh, I remember to pick up a flower at a gas station on my way home. But that's what coaches, that's what principals, that's what superintendents do a lot. is they just throw out these little trivial things once in a while.
Yeah.
But people see right through that. People see right through that. And they're not buying into us as a leader. We're not inspiring them. But we think, well, we got to get this paperwork done, or we got to get this play in, or we got to do this. Yeah. But then your people aren't following you. You know, John Maxwell used to say, if you don't have followers, you're just someone out for a long walk, you know, if no one's following you. But I would even go farther with the follower thing. And I'll come back. I'm going to circle back to your teammate thing too, but all this leads into teammates and building a team. But I think some of us have a misnomer of even what our duty as a leader is sometimes, is that we think, maybe not the duty, but we think, all right, we need complicit followers. We need compliant followers. I need good followers. Just do what I say. If you guys do what I say, everything's going to be good. If we take the approach that we're not we're not trying to develop compliant followers, but we're trying to develop other leaders. There is when we start to see our team maximizing their success, maximizing their potential. Because Lisa, you're only one person. I'm only one person. We can't do everything as a leader. We have to equip others. We have to enrich, enable, and empower others to do things on their own. And the more leaders we have on a team, all of a sudden our team is going to be that much better. It's going to, because when they become leaders themselves, they start to take ownership. They start to be invested in that process, invested in that team. And it's no longer Coach Bechler's team. It's now all of our team, because Coach has empowered us. I feel empowered as a leader. You know, every team is going to have like these proverbial fires in their locker room, you know, situations or drama that happens.
Yep.
Every school in their break room or after school is going to have issues, drama that happens. Are you as a principal, as a superintendent, me as a coach, are we equipping our people with fire extinguishers or lighter fluid? Are we equipping our people to handle that fire? Does it escalate? Does it get bigger? Or are they able to put it out? And if all we have is compliant followers, good followers, that fire is never going to get put out. You know, now they might run out of the room and go call 911. Well, that's better than putting gasoline on it. But what we want is someone to fight that fire right then. How can we equip them and empower them to make decisions and be good leaders to take us forward and to put out that fire, so to speak? So when you're building a team, I think as the leader, you know, the positional leader, if you equip and empower the people around you to make good decisions, to be leaders themselves, to take ownership in it, now all of a sudden you're going to have a much better team.
That was so powerful. I know when this gets, you know, put up, that's going to be a part of the podcast. I'm going to go back and re-listen to a whole bunch of times, because I'm just thinking about in my own current role, how that's so applicable. And I kind of just want to be like, okay, let me start over here. But that was really, really good. But let's talk pandemic for a second. How has that impacted leadership? You know, as you're talking about building trust. And so, you know, in my personal situation, I've been in a new position now for close to a year, not quite, but it's mostly been virtual. I've met most people one time in person. So how has the pandemic impacted leadership, or what has it revealed about leadership?
That's a great question. A couple of things that come to mind right away is one, I've worked with tons of teams during the pandemic, and almost unfortunately to a team, to a man, they're focused on what they can't do as opposed to what they can do. Well, all we can do is Zoom, or we can't do this. We can't do that. We were planning on doing this. Okay. But what can you do? Look at the positive. Look at what you can do. You know, a number of teams, and one in particular comes to mind, they had to go into quarantine, 14-day quarantine. And the coach was like, you know, Jamy, I don't know what to do. You know, we're going to practice. I don't know what to do. You know, they're all zoomed out. You know, and this is like 4 or 5 days into their 14-day quarantine. I said, well, how many times have you met with them on Zoom? And he said, none. I said, why? He goes, well, they're all zoomed out. I said, okay, but if you weren't in quarantine, what would you be doing right now? And he goes, practicing. I said, how long? every day, 2 hours a day. I said, do you not think that they're bored with practice? They're all practiced out. They hate practice. Most kids hate practice, but you still have practice. You can still have Zoom. You don't have to have it 2 hours a week or 2 hours a day like your practice. But if you have practice at 3:00, get together on Zoom at 3:00 from 3 to 3:30 every day. So you're touching base with your kids. And you know what? Don't call it Zoom. Put lipstick on a pig.
Yeah.
Call it something different. Have Wacky Wednesday. We're going to get together for Wacky Wednesday, and we're going to have fun. No basketball, no nothing. We're going to have fun on Wacky Wednesday. Maybe Monday is Motivational Monday. We're not calling it a Zoom call. We're just going to get on Zoom to do our Motivational Monday. And we're going to have a speaker, or we're going to do something inspirational or motivational. Maybe Friday was going to be our game. Well, that's going to be a competition day. And instead of playing a game, getting on a bus and traveling a half an hour to play an opponent, because we're quarantined, we can't do that. We're going to play a game on Zoom. We're going to have a competition amongst all of us. You come up with different things, not what you can't do, but what can you do? And all you have to do is Google, and you can find a million different ideas to do on. And you know what? This is where the empowering comes in. Empower your kids to be leaders. This old guy right here, Jamy, can't think of everything that a 16-year-old or a 21-year-old wants to do for fun. Have them come up with stuff.
Yeah.
We did some stuff when the quarantine first, or not quarantine, but when the pandemic first started, we did some things with sports teams where they took a month or 2 months. They put their athletes on little subsections or little groups, little teams. So maybe 3 or 4 athletes per team. And they would have a weekly competition. And each week it would be a different competition. But that group A, got to come up with the game for this week. And group B came up with the game for the next week. So it was almost like a home court advantage or a home field advantage. They were coming up with the game that hopefully they can win. And so now you're just playing for second place, but you keep points. And so you have them come up with stuff. And I know we're getting a little off target here, but it's what can we do? How can we be creative to come up with things to keep people engaged, to keep touch points, have karaoke, have everyone watch a movie together on Zoom. We even did with one team, their football team was in the state playoff or state championship game, and they did a virtual tailgate. A couple businesses in town donated food. And so they were all eating pizza from the same pizza joint or wings from the same wings joint, and that got a lot of publicity as well. So, you just have fun and everybody's on the same Zoom call, but you don't call it a Zoom call. You call it virtual tailgating, or we're having a tailgate.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah. So first thing is, don't worry about what you can't do. Worry about what you can do. The second thing that you mentioned, which was really good, was what did it reveal? It really has revealed during COVID, if you really care about your people, if you really care about your culture, if you really are a good leader, because we were all tested, and we're still being tested to some degree, but during the last year, we were kind of tested on this. And I lost track of how many organizations, and one person I really respected, a public figure, he talked about how he loves his people. He loves his people. He loves his people. Culture means everything to him. And so that's why it was so hard to let go about 30 people in his organization during COVID, because it was so hard to let them go because people mean so much to them. And yet he's worth $300 million and his company is still raking in the money. Mm-hmm. And far be it from me to say what anyone should do with their money, but don't say people are the most important and we had to let them go when you didn't explore other options. And there are a lot of things in between. I have to let them go and they're getting a raise. There's a lot of room on that continuum. And so we saw during the pandemic, a lot of leaders kind of take the easy way out. And they said that, oh, this is the hardest thing I've ever had to do. Well, no, it would have been harder for you to take a pay cut, or it would have been harder for you to go to all your employees and say, listen, would you be willing to take a 10% cut in pay for a short term so that we don't have to let people go? And then if they say, no, I don't want to take that cut, you don't fire them. You say, okay, thank you. But that would have been a harder thing to go to your people, be transparent, be honest, and say, listen, we don't want to have to do this. We need help. Let's figure out a way to keep all these people employed. So, that doesn't really deal with sports teams necessarily, even though I saw this with a lot of athletic departments at the college level cutting sports programs.
Yep.
We now all of a sudden don't have money, so we're going to cut sports programs. And it's like, okay, but there's some other things you could do first. Like there's other things you can do. It doesn't have to be all in or all out on stuff. Good leaders find solutions. Good leaders don't look at compromise as a negative word, but look at compromise as a win-win. What can we do to make the best of this situation, at least for 3 more months or 6 months? There's always some things that you can do. You deal with this all the time in business. People are like, well, I can't give you a raise. Okay, but can I have every other Friday off? Or can I work from home once a week? Or can I do this? Or this policy says I have to put in my vacation 3 months in advance. Can I do it 2 months in advance? There's always something we can do to help situations out. And as leaders are always trying to find ways to find win-win solutions. Managers are essentially just going with standard operating procedures and saying, no, we can't do that. That's not the way we do things here. And they don't look at other perspectives. They just see their tree and not the whole forest. They don't walk a mile in anyone else's shoes. And so we saw that a lot during COVID.
Everything I just heard you say, I feel like comes back to the word creativity, being creative. And when there's challenges that are thrown at you, whether it's a pandemic or figuring out Zoom, that an effective leader really figures out how to be creative and create wins. So one of the questions I was going to ask you that I'm not, because I feel like if you go back and listen to this, you'll hear the answers, but what skills do effective leaders need to have? And again, I think that you talk about that a lot, but I'm going to end with this question. I feel like I could pick your brain all afternoon, but I'm going to end with this question. What do you know for sure about leadership?
Well, what I know for sure about leadership is that I don't do it well all the time. And it's not easy. Mm-hmm. It's not easy. We talked earlier about simplistic. Leadership's not easy. It is not easy. It's simple to write a leadership book. It's simple to write a blog. It's simple for me to tell you in theory. Yeah. It's a lot harder for me to do it. I have players that hate my guts. I have people that I've worked with that don't like me. Now I have other people that do like me. It's not easy. What I'd say, even as a coach, there's things that I know to do and I just choose not to do it because my ego gets in the way or my feelings get in the way, my emotions get in the way. I majored in communications in college and people used to be like, or we'd used to joke, the only difference between me as a communication major and somebody else is that I know what's being communicated and what's going on when it's actually happening. But when I point it out to you, you'll be like, oh, that makes sense. But that doesn't mean that I communicate right. I just recognize it quicker.
Yeah. Yeah.
Leaders, I recognize things a lot quicker as a leader. It doesn't mean that I do the right thing. I know how, like I intentionally choose to not treat someone well or to ignore someone or to act like they don't exist or, hey, this player, I don't like this player, so I'm not going to go out of my way. I intentionally choose that. I choose not to do what I'm supposed to do. The same way I know full well I should be drinking a bottle of water instead of a Dr. Pepper, or I should be having an apple instead of a Kit Kat. It's not that I have a hard time knowing what I should do. It's that I have a hard time making that decision because I want what I want right now. And so as leaders, sometimes our egos are involved or we want our personal gain or I don't like this person. You know what? If you want a great team, you might not like everybody, but you need to try to find the best in everybody and find their value and find significance in everybody. You've been in education, that's your bread and butter. Education. We're going to have classrooms where we don't like somebody. And let me end with this story. Allow me to end with this boring story here. I'm in seventh grade and there's this group project. My friend Bill and I, All right, we have to do this group project, a partner project, and see, I'm a good student. I'm a good kid. Bill's not. Bill's a screw up. But Bill and I are friends. We play football together, GI Joes together, all this kind of stuff. He actually does a lot of work on this project. We turn it in. It's a great project. The teacher hands it back to us. I got an A, Bill got an F. I remember to this day the teacher saying, Bill, I know that there's no way you did this work because you're not a good student and Jamie's a great student. And I know that you probably relied upon him to do all the work.
Wow.
Now, we can be appalled at that, but the reality is we think like that a lot of times. Like we don't give people the benefit of the doubt. That's a natural thought. Now, not everybody might voice it, especially in today's day and age. We won't voice it for fear of legal ramifications, but we think that kind of stuff. But here's the point of that story, or the end of the story, and then I'll get to the point. Fast forward 5 years later, Bill continues to go down, spiral down, make bad choices. He's into drugs. He ends up killing 2 people. Life in prison. Okay. I have zero idea if he had gotten an A on that assignment, if his life would have been different. I don't know that. I don't have a crystal ball. What I do know with 100% certainty, Lisa, is that there was one time that I know of in Bill's life where an authority figure had a chance to catch him being good. An authority figure had a chance to say, Bill, you have value in life. You have significance. You have done good. Well done. Well done. And I don't know if anyone's ever done that to him, if anyone ever said that to him. I don't know that. But I know one time somebody in authority could have done that and they failed to do that. Now, I think we do that all the time as coaches, as leaders, and it might not be a murder situation down the road, but how many times could we just say a kind word to a student or a kind word to the custodian just to get them through the next 30 minutes of their day, where maybe they can go impact, or maybe they're more excited about their job, or they're more excited about that math class, or more excited about doing their homework. We never know, but our interactions as leaders can inspire people. And it doesn't have to be this big, huge legacy or this big, huge, Hollywood where we are on a horse and we inspire thousands to follow us in the battle. It might just be inspiring one person to take that next step in the day. And then maybe someone else they meet that inspires them to take the next step. And then someone else inspires them to take the next step. And so as leaders, we need to be constantly working hard to make other people's lives better.
Yeah, what a perfect way to end, because I feel like you talked about, one, giving yourself a little bit of grace if you're not perfect. I have never made that correlation or connection before between, other habits in my life and leadership, and you just want to be perfect all the time. But I appreciate your words of, giving yourself a little grace, but then also ending with just the importance of why it's important to be intentional about influence. We started with that word influence, and I think that you just touched on that again, that it's so important to be thoughtful about that. So, Jamy, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. I appreciate so much you taking the time out to have this conversation today.
I was glad to do it. I appreciate what you're doing. I mean, just helping support leaders and helping make other leaders better and inspiring them and telling stories. So that's awesome. I appreciate what you're doing, Lisa.
Thanks for listening to the Supporting Leaders podcast. For more on supporting leaders, go to www.supportingleaders.org. Here you'll find links to the YouTube versions of our interviews and links to the podcast. You'll also find articles on leadership. To join in on the conversation, find the Supporting Leaders group on Facebook and find us on Instagram at Supporting Leaders.